Judges chapter 10 is where we are at this morning. And in Matthew chapter 6, which is a long way from Judges chapter 10, in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus said this: "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon." And the word mammon means treasure, and he was speaking specifically to those that were out to get money. But the principle remains the same, that you cannot serve two masters. There's always going to be one master that you do serve and another one that you do not. Well, that really describes the history of Israel. And as we're going through the book of Judges, what we're learning is that it's a period of history, the history of Israel, world history, but really the history of Israel. It's a period of about 200 to 300 years of the history of Israel. Now, this is important for us to understand because there is right now, and you may have seen this or experienced this, and might not even be aware of it. You might have seen it, but not really known what it was all about. There is a rise in anti-Semitism. Whether it's Kanye saying, something about the Jews, or Heil Hitler, or whatever that kook is doing this week, or whether it's individuals online or in the news, people complaining about Israel or complaining about the Jews, or Jews being attacked in New York City. It's happening. There's a rise of what we call anti-Semitism, anti-Semites. They're people that are coming against the Jews. And it might be confusing for you as you're hearing news stories or different people on social media. What you want to understand is you want to understand these things from a biblical worldview. Now, you and I as Christians, if you're a Christian, what you want to develop is a biblical worldview. What does that mean? Well, a biblical worldview means that we see everything that's going on in the world and in the United States and in California and wherever we're at, even on your school campus or in your neighborhood or at your home. You want to view that through, imagine, a biblical lens, a Bible lens. In other words, when I look at the world, I see it as if I had a lens that was made out of my Bible. And now what I'm doing is I'm looking at the world and I want to see it the way God sees it. So in this area, the context of Israel and people hating Israel and hating the Jews and wanting to attack them, what you need to understand is that back in Genesis, that's the first book of the Bible, Genesis chapter 12. It's the book of first things. It's the beginnings. In Genesis chapter 12, God spoke randomly. I mean, it wasn't random on God's part, but as far as we're concerned, we don't know, we don't have a clue as to why he spoke and called this man named Abram and his wife Sarai. But he calls this man Abram, and in Genesis chapter 12, just the first 3 verses, he tells Abram, "I want you to leave everything that you know, and I want you to come with me to a land that I will show you." Well, what you find out as you continue reading through the story in the next couple of chapters of Genesis, 13, 14, you find out that that land that God was telling Abram, "Come follow me and I'll show you a land," what he was in fact doing was he was telling Abram, "I'm going to give you that land. That land is going to be yours, and not just yours, but it's going to belong to all of your descendants." So God was promising him that land there in Genesis. Now, as you continue reading, and it becomes very clear, I believe it's in chapter 14, becomes very clear that the land that God is talking about and promising to Abram is the land of Israel, as you and I know it today. Actually, we're seeing a smaller portion of it right now. God gave them more. They just didn't take it all. But it's the land of Israel. Now, you can like that or not like that. Well, how about this group of people, and why do the Israelites get to have it? And you can complain all you want. I'm just telling you what I've read. So I'm just telling you, hey, this is what I've heard. This is what I've read. This is what I've learned. So if you don't like that, you can be mad. You can hate the Jews. You can hate Israel. You can hate whoever you want. But really, your complaint is with God, because God was the one that gave it to them. Now, saying that doesn't mean that everything that the Israelites have done in their history has been good, because it most certainly has not. There have been many times throughout their history where they did not treat people or other nations right. They didn't treat them in a godly fashion the way that they should. And so they have incurred the judgment of God and even the judgment of the world at times because of the way that they have treated other nations or other people. So I'm not saying that God gave them the land, so that means that they're perfect people. They certainly are not. And in fact, the reason I'm bringing all that up is because the book of Judges is all about the fact that they were not always right. Israel, the people of Israel, have always been on this roller coaster from the time that God saved them from Egypt and slavery. There's been times of obedience to the Lord and times of disobedience to the Lord. And it seems like the times of disobedience have been far greater than the times of obedience to the Lord. And when they've lived in obedience to the Lord, they're doing good. God's blessing them. And when they're living in disobedience to the Lord, then God is disciplining them and bringing other nations to come and oppress them. And we'll see that today in this chapter. So what I'm telling you is the book of Judges is a period of about 200 to 300 years. We might call it like the Dark Ages. Some of you are familiar with history a little bit. You might have heard of the Dark Ages. This would be one of their Dark Ages. They've had lots of them over the centuries since they've been in existence. There's been lots and lots and lots and lots of times, countless times of them being disobedient to the Lord, mistreating other people, cheating others. God calls them out throughout the Bible. They've never been a perfect people. So don't get that mindset. What I simply want you to understand is that what we're reading as we come to the book of Judges, and in Judges chapter 10, we'll see it again. It's this cycle. I call it a sin cycle, where they're doing well. They're following the Lord. And then they seem to get bored with the Lord and they start to worship other gods, other idols. They start to get involved in sin. And after a while, after they've done that for a long time, then God, he begins to discipline them. And then once they experience his discipline, they turn and they go, oh God, we're so sorry. And then God forgives them and he works in them again. And then after a while, they go through that same cycle. And if somebody wants to hate Israel and point fingers, you guys are so, this or that and everything's wrong, that's fine if you want to do that, but just keep in mind that as you're pointing, you've got 3 more fingers pointing back at you. Who among us hasn't followed the Lord and then fallen away and then followed the Lord and then fallen away and followed the Lord and fallen away? It's the pattern of humankind. It's mankind. Humans, that's what we do. We do well for long periods of time, and then we do terrible for long periods of time, and then we do well, and then we do terrible, and we've always been back and forth. Mankind has always been back and forth and back and forth. This is simply putting the nation of Israel under a microscope and looking at them for this period of a few hundred years and going, oh yeah, they did a lot of bad things. And that's what's being highlighted here. And the name Judges is in reference to the leaders, men and women, that God raised up at different times to give his people some leadership to get them out of those dark times. And so these judges would come along and the nation would do well for a little while, but then when the judge died, then the nation would sink back into darkness and despair, and it was just a cycle. It goes over and over and over again. And why would you and I be studying this ancient document that just keeps going through the same cycle? Why would we do that? So that we can realize 2 things. We can realize the cycle of sin that you and I oftentimes we go through, and then at the same time understand the mercies, not just one mercy, but the mercies of God, and how he just keeps putting up with us. And not just putting up with us like an older sibling might do for some pesty little sibling. Not just putting up with us like, I'm just putting up with you till mom and dad get home. But no, he's always loving us and always seeking to restore us and change us and for us to grow and to be restored and forgiven. And do that, and then we fall into sin again, and then we change, and then we fall into sin again, and that's what happens time and time and time again. And it's they're good reminders. We need repetition. Now, you can see here how I broke the chapter down, and in verses 1 and 2, we're going to see this judge named Tola, And then in verses 3 through 5, we will see a judge named Yair. And then finally in verses 6 through 18, we will begin the story of Jephthah, the next judge. The first two are very brief. So those of you that are, you're normally here, you're used to being here, you know how this works. I actually, this time, I do not have any subpoints for Tola or Yair because they're so short. But we will have a couple of subpoints for Jephthah, and we'll have some other things that I will show you. But let's read about Tola here in verse 1. Now this poor guy, I mean, check out these names. After Abimelech, that was the previous judge. After Abimelech, there arose to save Israel, keep that phrase in mind, Tola, the son of Puah, the son of Dodo. That's rough. Some of you might have middle names that you got, your mom or your dad, like, no, I want to name my son or my daughter after, grandma or grandpa or something, and it might be like, oh yeah, my middle name's Gertrude or something, and you might just feel like, I don't like that, you didn't have a choice. You didn't have a choice in the matter. Maybe you can change it later or whatever, but I mean, this is rough. Tola, Puah, Dodo. It doesn't sound like a great pedigree, but still, notice what it says in verse 1, that there arose to save Israel. Okay? Now, we do not know exactly what Tola did. As we read on, we read that he was a man of Issachar, and he dwelt in Shamir, in the mountains of Ephraim. He judged Israel 23 years, and he died and was buried in Shamir. So it's a very, very short story. Now, we're told in verse 1 that he arose to save Israel, but we're not told how he saved Israel. And on the pages of Judges, lots of times we get the story. This is what they did. Well, with Tola, there wasn't. I have no idea why. It just, for whatever reason, God did not see it as important enough to put the entire story in there, so he just gave us that. That's all we got. But you'll see that he judged Israel 23 years. Now, again, the word judge doesn't necessarily mean a man or a woman in a long black robe with a gavel who's doling out, judgments. You broke the law, boom, you got to do this. Some of these judges did do that. In fact, Yair, it seems like he may have been somebody that just made judgments. He was just a judge. But some of these judges did that. They judged cases, but then they also went out and grabbed a sword and saved Israel in some way. Well, Tola here, we're just told that he saved Israel in some way, some fashion. He led Israel for 23 years, and then he died and was buried in Shamir. And that's all we get. Now, Yair, in verses 3 through 5, after him arose Yair, a Gileadite. So he was from Gilead. And he judged Israel 22 years. And that's all we get. It doesn't say that he saved Israel. So it might be that he just judged Israel. That's all he did. Which is a big deal. That's a good thing. But we're not told that he saved Israel at all. Now check this out. We're told this about Yair. Now he had 30 sons who rode on 30 donkeys. They also had 30 towns, which are called Havoth Yair. That's the towns of Yair to this day, to the time of the writing, which are in the land of Gilead, and Yair died and was buried in Kamon. So that's all we get. But some interesting things before we move on. He was from Gilead. We'll hear a little bit more about Gilead as we get into our next section. He judged Israel for 22 years. So between Tola and Yair, what do we have? We have 45 years there of history. But you can see there, 45 years, but we really don't have many details. Again, for whatever reason, God just decided, no, this is not the story to share. Let's move on. But we do read in verse 4 that he had 30 sons. Now, it's my assumption. It doesn't say this, so this is an assumption. That means you can toss this out if you want. It's my assumption that he was that he had lots of wives. Now, if you weren't here for the former studies that we had in Judges, especially the story of Gideon a few chapters back, then you might, if you're trying to figure out, well, why, he had a bunch of sons, but this guy's supposed to be serving God in some way, and, I thought God didn't like that. Well, God doesn't like that. He doesn't approve of many different wives. A polygamist, that's the word I was looking for. God doesn't approve of polygamy. When God set up relationships, It was Adam and Eve. That's it. Not Adam and Eve's sister, Eve's, and anything else. It was just Adam and Eve. Jesus, he confirmed that when they asked him about marriage, and Jesus said, well, in the beginning, God made them male and female. So there was just two of them. Throughout the scriptures, throughout the Bible, the Old Testament, you find that there were many leaders who had multiple wives. It's not a good thing. And again, you can go back, and if you wanted to dig in, you could go back to our YouTube channel, find the study on Gideon, and you can find out about God's permissive will, what God allows but doesn't necessarily approve of. He might allow it to happen, but doesn't necessarily approve of it. And that's probably the case here. I don't know that to be a fact that he didn't just have one wife, but I cannot imagine some wife pushing out 30 boys. I mean, that would kill her. Not to mention the Costco bill. Can you imagine having 30 sons? Good night, nurse. I mean, those of you that have brothers, boys, man. They're like locusts. They just go through and eat everything. When I was a young man and I was still growing, I would come home just so, be outside playing football or whatever I was doing. I come inside, I'm just hungry, I'm starving, I'm ready to, kill my own, goat and eat it or something. And when there was nothing to eat, some of you have done this. I would go into the cupboard, the pantry, I'd get a slice of bread, peel off the ends. I did like the ends, eat the ends, and then I'd ball it up into a bread ball. Then I'd eat that. And if that didn't satisfy, I'd get another one. I'd eat half a loaf of bread, man, just trying to put something in there. I mean, we can just eat, us guys, and especially when you're a teenage guy, man, you just eat. But 30 sons, that's crazy. But we're told that these 30 sons rode on 30 donkeys. Now that sounds funky to us. We're like Tola, Pua, Dodo. And now you got Yaid, and he's got 30 sons, but they're riding on 30 donkeys. It's like, okay, that's not something that's, we don't admire that. Like, who wants to ride on a donkey? I mean, we're in Kentucky here, so we got horses all over the place, and none of us would ever go, you know what? I want to ride an animal. I really want a donkey. We wouldn't do that. We would, if we were going to ride an animal, we'd be like, no, saddle up a horse, man. Let's get out of here. There's no way we would ride a donkey. But they rode donkeys. But you must understand, different time, different place, different world altogether. Riding a donkey, that was status. That was like pulling up into your neighborhood or at your school in your Beamer or your Mercedes, or you pull up in a Corvette, or you pull up in a, I was on the freeway yesterday, I saw a Rolls Royce. I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, but your pastor loves Rolls Royces. Love Rolls Royces. And I saw, man, we were on the freeway, and I looked over and saw a Rolls Royce, and I was like, it was one of those moments where I glanced over, and I was like, hey, I can see me in there. I looked so cool driving that Rolls Royce. But instead, I was in my Volkswagen. Pulling up on a donkey was status. Not everybody had donkeys, especially 30 sons with 30 donkeys. Yair was, that's status. And they also had their own towns. Everybody had their own town, 30 towns. And they called that collection of towns Havot Yair, the towns of Yair. It all belonged to that one family. And so they were in the land of Gilead, but Yair died and was buried in Kamon. So we move on to Jephthah. Now, let me get you some subpoints here. We're going to go look at verses 6 through 18. And it says in verse 6, then the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. So the idea would be that in the first 5 verses between these two judges, seems like Israel, they were doing okay. 45 years, they seem to be doing all right. But in verse 6, the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord. Well, what did they do? We're told 2 things. They served the Baals and the Ashtoreths, the gods of Syria, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the people of the Ammons, the Ammonites, and the Lord and the gods of the Philistines. And the second thing they did was they forsook the Lord and did not serve him. Now remember, I read to you from what Jesus said, and Jesus said you can't serve 2 masters. So these individuals, they didn't serve 2 masters. They traded in God to serve the Baals and the Ashtoreths. Now, What are the Baals and the Ashtoreths? Well, those were the names of the gods that the people in that region, the Canaanite people, that they worshipped. So Israel said, you know what, God? Forget you. They rejected the Lord. Rejection of the Lord means they rejected the Lord. They rejected the Lord and instead decided to serve the Baals and the Ashtoreths. Now, we're American, right? America. And what do we like most of all? We like freedom. I don't want nobody telling me nothing, right? I can do what I want, and I can go where I want, I can wear what I want, I can drive what I want, and I can vote for whoever I want or not vote, and I can go to the store and buy whatever I want. You don't tell me what to do. We love freedom, okay? Understand this. The Baals and the Ashtoreths, they represented freedom in a sense. It really represented freedom in the sense that there were no boundaries. Anything goes. The Baals and the Ashtoreths, it sounds harmless enough. Well, they just they didn't want to worship God anymore. Leave them alone. They wanted to worship the Baals and the Ashtoreths. And it sounds like, we're Americans. We understand. Just leave them alone. They can worship whoever they want to worship. The problem was that the Baals and the Ashtoreths, these gods, they were not really gods. They were false gods. If anything, they were demonic or demons representing themselves or disguising themselves as these other gods. Now, part of the problem here was not only that they forsook God, they turned their back on God in order to worship these other gods, but it's what those gods, the Baals and the Ashtoreths, the gods of the Syrians, the Sidonians, the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Philistines, it's what their worship required. Among other things, and if you've been around for our Sunday morning study, you know some of this already, so I won't go into depth and I won't go back too far, but you already know that worship of those gods, the Baals, the Ashtoreths, the gods of the Syrians, the Sidonians, all these people, that they required things that were contrary to what God required. They required sacrifice, not just of animals, but also at times human sacrifice and sexual sacrifice. And it was all forms of sexual sacrifice, meaning part of the worship was sex with men, women, kids, animals, dead, alive, necromancy. It was everything that you can imagine, and everything that you do not want to imagine. It was all included and required by the worship of the Baals and the Ashtoreths. So the problem was not just that they wanted to worship someone other than God, and why don't they have the freedom to do that? The problem was that they had gotten up into their eyeballs in this worship, and they were doing those same things to the point that they were sexually sacrificing in those ways and also sacrificing their own children, human sacrifice. So that was the problem. It was putrid, and you don't have to take my word for it. You go back if you want. If you don't believe me, you go back and look up ancient Canaanite worship, and you find out what they did. You find out what they did. They have found, as they're unearthing to this day, that when they unearth homes from that time, from that region, they find jars, clay jars, built into the wall of their home, built into the wall with baby skeletons inside of them. Because they believed that in order for their home to be blessed by their specific God, they had to sacrifice one of their babies by putting them in a jar and plastering them into the wall and closing them into the wall. All of us can agree something's wrong there. When it says that they served the Baals and the Ashtoreths, it's not just like, well, these are really sweet people, and it's kind of like Leave It to Beaver, and they're just nice people, and come on, leave these people alone. They're just kind of trying to do their own thing. No, the problem is how far it went and how sinful it was and how wicked it was. They did that, but they also, at the end of verse 6, they forsook the Lord. They did not serve him. Now, because of that, beginning at verse 7, we have rejection from the Lord. So what happens is, you can probably gather from this from the heading, is that first they rejected the Lord. So what did he do in verse 7 down to verse 18? He then rejected them. Now I'll explain. Verse 7, so the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel. Everybody knows what that means. Because everybody in here, at least one time in your life, you've been in trouble with your mom or your dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, your guardian, whoever it was. At some point, you and your bad self, you did something, and it made somebody so angry that they were hot. And they just came in looking for you, and they were ready to just swing when they saw you, and they were ready to take your life for a moment. Well, the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel. So in verse 7 it says, he sold them into the hands of the Philistines and into the hands of the people of Ammon, or the Ammonites. Now let's pause here for a moment so I can explain something to you. What does that mean, that he sold them into the hands of the Philistines and the Ammonites? It means that his people had rejected him and were disobedient to him. So what he did was, he, being God, being in control, he called the Philistines and the Ammonites, he called them to come over and discipline or punish his own people. That's what it means by he sold them into their hands. Now this could be a little bit confusing for you and I, because we are of the understanding, the belief that God doesn't forsake his people. He doesn't, cast them out or get rid of them. And I would say to you, he does not do that. What you learn as you read the Bible, and you can find this out just by doing a cursory reading of the Bible. Just read the Bible. You don't have to understand everything. Just read through it. What you will find is that God does, in fact, at times reject his people. But he doesn't ever reject his people as a whole. There's never been a time since he chose Israel where he said, you know what, Israel, I am done with you completely. I'm getting rid of you. I'm never working in you again. He's never done that. There are times where he will reject that generation of Israel, or that generation of his people, that specific group, because they're living in disobedience, so he will reject them. But what you also find out as you read the Bible, and again you can find this out by just doing a cursory reading of the Bible, is that God always has something called a remnant. Now those of you that might be familiar with sowing, you might go, oh, a remnant. I know what a remnant is. That's like the, part that didn't get used, just kind of leftover pieces. Or maybe you have a grandma that does quilting, and, she uses squares and pieces of cloth. The remnant is, there's always this small bunch that didn't get used. Well, the same thing is true with God. He may reject a generation of his people, but he's always got a remnant, a small group of people that still worship him, still follow him. And as you read through the Bible, you learn that there were times when God certainly did that. He would reject these large groups of his own people, but he always had a remnant. Just a small group. They were still faithful to him. And so that is the case here when it says that he sold them into the hands of the Philistines. It doesn't mean that he just gave up on all of his people altogether. It means that he was disciplining that group. He was selling that group of people and saying, you know what? We're gonna discipline you. I'm gonna discipline you so that the whole nation can be saved, and the whole nation won't be ruined. It's always best to take care of a problem before it affects everything else or the larger group. So in verse 7, we're told there that he sold them into the hands of the Philistines and into the hands of the Ammonites. From that year, they harassed and oppressed the children of Israel for 18 years. All the children of Israel who were on the other side of the Jordan in the land of the Amorites in Gilead. There's something there that you need to know. It's pertinent to that to that part of the story, in case you do not know. Now, years before this, the children of Israel were going to the promised land. God had given them the promised land. They're finally going. They get to the Jordan River. That was named after a guy named Michael. Just kidding. It wasn't even after Michael Jordan. But they're going to the into the promised land. And they get to the river, and there's a group of them who go, you know what? We really like it on this side of the river. It's really nice for our cattle. It was a strange story because it's like, yeah, we've got wife and kids, but this is really good for our cattle. It was like, well, yeah, but what about your wife and kids? As long as the cattle are good. Anyways, they decided that they were going to stay on that side of the river. Well, this upset Moses. He was the leader at the time, and Moses was like, he literally goes off, and he's just like, you're out of your mind. You're not staying over there. You're going to get us in trouble with God. God said to go over here. Well, then they came to an agreement, and they said, fine, you can stay on this side. So what happened was you had a small group of the Israelites on that side of the river, and then you had everybody else on the other side of the river. Well, guess which group of people were being harassed and oppressed first? Which ones were being picked off? All of you have watched nature shows, documentaries at some point, and you're seeing, they're showing a herd of gazelles out in the middle of the, wilderness or whatever, and here comes a lion. And who does that lion go after? The lion doesn't go after the first one in the herd that's way up there in the front. The lion gets the smallest one, or the one that's got a limp or whatever, the one that's at the back, the one that ends up being separated. Same thing here. When the Ammonites and the Philistines came, what did they do? They attacked that smaller group of people that were separated by themselves over on the other side of the river. Now, they'll make their way over to the other side of the river, but for now, the lesson is this. The lesson is that there are Christians, I know none of us in here would ever do this, but there are Christians who they want to get saved, but they just want fire insurance. They want to get saved, and they want to know that they're going to heaven. Okay, I got saved, I'm going to heaven. But they want to continue to live like they're going to hell. They want to have one foot over here like, oh, no, I'm saved, and I'm a Christian, and I love the Lord. But over here, let me still live like I'm not saved, like I don't even know Jesus. They are Christians who, they want to get saved, but you know what, that's enough. I don't want to go crazy. I don't want to start, I don't want to go crazy, start going to church twice a week, man. That would be crazy. I'm not doing all that. I'm just trying to get saved enough so that I know that I'm going to heaven after I'm done living my own life. It's like an individual. We don't really have the freedom here in America to get in the back of a truck anymore and drive down the highway. When I was younger, that's how old I am. When I was younger, we used to be able to just, me and all my Mexican cousins, get in the back of the truck and we just drive down the highway. And it was freedom, it was fun. We'd be back there laughing and the wind's blowing, getting hit by bugs or whatever, and we just thought it was the coolest thing. I look back now as a dad and I'm like, man, that was crazy. I can't believe my parents just let me get in the back of a truck. We could have gotten a wreck, flipped over, and been just a whole bunch of beans scattered all over the road, man. I mean, it's scary. But it's freedom. Once in a while in Mexico, we get to do that. When we go on the Mexico mission trips, you might be able to jump in the back of a truck and you just feel like, oh man, this is really cool. And when you get in the back of a truck, there are always two kinds of people in the back of the truck. There are people who go, you know what, I'm getting in the back of the truck, it's a lot of fun, but I don't want to die. And so they scoot up as far as they can against the front of the truck, and they're up toward the cab. And then you always have the people that go, no, man, I'm trying to hang out by the tailgate. And they want to hang out at the back of the tailgate, or they want to sit on top of the tailgate while you're going over bumpy roads. And what they're trying to do is get as far away from the cab as they can. Well, this group of individuals here, the ones that were in Gilead that got attacked by the Ammonites and the Philistines, they were the type that wanted to be at the back of the truck. Let me get as far away from God as I can. And in doing that, they were the first ones to be picked off. And the truth is this, that there are Christians who just seem to always fall into sin, man. They're always getting picked off. The enemy just seems to always just have freedom to just attack them and pull them away. And it might be because that individual or those individuals, they're not trying to get closer to the Lord. They're trying to be like, you know what, I'm saved, but I don't want to really live like that. I want to be saved and know that I'm going to heaven, but I'm trying to live like I'm going to hell, man, because that lifestyle looks, I like that lifestyle. And so the danger is that you can get picked off if what you're trying to do is, I want to be saved, but I want to stay away from God as far as I can. What we want to do is develop a hunger and a desire to try to be as close to God as we can. Okay, so I don't want to ask the question, well, how far can I be from God but still be a Christian? I don't want to ask that question. What I want to ask is, how close can I get to God? How close can I get to Him? And then I want to work that way and head in that direction. Well, these individuals here that we're reading about, they were living on the other side of the river. They've separated themselves. And so in verse 8, they're being attacked and oppressed by the Amorites, by the Philistines. So in verse 9, it says, moreover, the people of Ammon crossed over the Jordan to fight against Judah, against Benjamin, and against the house of Ephraim, so that Israel was severely distressed. Now, these three individuals that I just named, Judah, Benjamin, and Ephraim, a long time before what you and I are reading, those were actual people. Those were names of people. What we're talking about now when we say Judah, Benjamin, and Ephraim, what we're talking about is their descendants now. These are the people or the family of Judah, the family of Benjamin, the family of Ephraim. And you'll notice that Ammon, after they finished attacking the people on the other side of the river, well, now they've got some boldness because, oh, these are God's people. And we were scared, but we just went and attacked them and nothing happened to us. So I tell you what, let's cross over the Jordan, man, and we'll just keep going and attacking these people that supposedly belong to God. So they're filled with boldness. They go across and they start attacking everybody else. And the result of that is at the end of verse 9 that Israel was severely distressed. So in verse 10, the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, saying two things. We have sinned against you because we have both, number one, forsaken our God, and number two, served the Baals. You see, they knew what they were guilty of. They knew what they were guilty of. That's what the verses before this said, that they were serving these other gods and they had forsaken their own God. So they confessed that. Now, normally that's the goal. Normally verse 10 would be the goal of verse 7, if you go back and glance at verse 7. When God is forsaking his own people, normally verse 10 would be the goal. However, it seems to us that this time the people have pushed God too far. Because they say, we have sinned against you because we have both forsaken our God and served the Baals. And so God actually answers them in verse 11. So the Lord said to the children of Israel, ask them a question, gives them a history lesson. Did I not deliver you? Did I not save you from the Egyptians and from the Amorites? And from the people of Ammon, the Ammonites, and from the Philistines? He's asking them a question, but what he's reminding them is, I saved you from the Egyptians, the Amorites, the Ammonites, and the Philistines. Verse 12, also the Sidonians and Amalekites and Maonites, who actually ended up inventing mayonnaise. And they oppressed you. I'm just kidding, they didn't really do that. The Sidonians, the Amalekites, the Maonites, they oppressed you. And you cried out to me, and I delivered you from their hand. So God's reminding them, in the past, you cried out to me because these people were oppressing you, and I've already saved you from all of these people, the Egyptians, the Amorites, the Ammonites, the Sidonians, the Amalekites, the Maonites. That's 6 different groups of people. I saved you from all of these people already. Verse 13, yet you have forsaken me and served other gods. And look at verse 13. Therefore, so that means because of that, I will deliver you no more. God says, I'm done delivering you. I delivered you from all these people already. You keep turning against me. I'm done delivering you. So again, does that mean that God's just given up on Israel? No. But he has given up on that group of Israelites, that generation of Israelites. He says, you know what? You've pushed me too far. Did you know that God had a limit? Did you know that God had a limit? That people can push God so far that God says, okay, I love you people, but you're so disobedient that I'm not coming to your rescue this time. Figure it out yourself. That's exactly what happens here. In verse 14, God actually tells them, go and cry out to the gods which you have chosen, the Baals, the Ashtoreths. Let them deliver you in your time of distress. Go back to them. See if they'll save you. They couldn't, because they weren't really gods. They were statues. They were idols. They were ungodly. They were wicked. They couldn't save. Now, this gives us some valuable counsel from God's word here. Here's what happens. Some of you are in here are freshmen. You're about to become a sophomore. What happens in your freshman year is that if you're a Christian, you belong to a youth group like we are here. As a freshman, and we're about to get freshmen coming in, right? At the end of summer, we'll have the new freshmen coming in from junior high. And what will happen is, and you can attest to this if you're sophomore, junior, senior especially, you enter high school with friends, homies, your posse, your crew, your boys, your girls. And you come in here and I tell you this, I tell you, hey, freshman, look around. Because in 4 years, not all of your friends are going to be here. And you go, man, no way, man. We're like, we're friends. We're together forever, tougher than leather. Man, this is it. Like we're the crew. Us four, no more. Shut the door. No, you're like we're here for life. And then you can attest to this, and you can ask the seniors that are in here, where are all those friends at? Some of them are still here, but some have disappeared. Some are gone. Where'd they go? Lots of different places. Lots of different places. People get distracted by lots of different things. The most common that I've seen after years and years and years of youth ministry, the two that I've seen that have been the most distracting for Christians are sports and moolah, money, dead presidents.
Mean green.
Everybody, what's that?
Mean green.
Mean green. There's a reason why they call it mean green. Those are the two things that are the most distracting. And what will happen is you'll get into high school, and some of you already know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But you get into high school, and what happens? You're like, man, you know what? Mom, Dad, I really want some new J's. Can you buy me some new J's? No, that's too much money. We're not buying you that. We'll buy you some Chucks. I don't want Chucks, man. I want J's. Well, you want J's, buy them yourself. Okay. I'm going to get a job at the Krabby Patty. And I'm going to start flipping Krabby Patties. And you know what? I'm going to make my own money, and I'm going to buy my own J's. And you get your J's. But now you're like, well, wait a minute. They don't really match anything I'm wearing. You know what? I need to get that sweatshirt. Or I need to get those pants. And so what you do is you start working. And you know what? You go, you know what? God loves me, doesn't he? Yeah, he loves you. He'll understand. I got to start working on Sundays. I got to work on Wednesdays, man. Wednesday nights. God loves me. I'll be back, God. I'm just going to get some J's, and now I'm going to get a new fit. I'll be back. And what happens is that money starts rolling in, and then it's like, oh, this is kind of nice. Well, wait a minute. I've got these new J's, but I don't want to ruin them walking all over town. You know what I need? I need a car, man. Give me a car. And so then we start working for that car. And all the time, what happens is often, not every time, some people balance it really well. But a lot of times what happens is, you know what? God, I'll be back. I need to go take care of this over here. And we get distracted by those things. Sometimes it's relationships. That's another common one, but I found that the two most common are, again, sports. Like, oh man, well I'm trying to make the team, man. I'm trying to, do big things. I'm trying to make it to college. I'm trying to do these things. And so, you know what? I just gotta go for it, man. And God will understand. God, I'll be back. I'm gonna go become, a star in sports, on the school team, and I'll be back, God. Don't worry. And then you find that they start to slip away. There's nothing wrong with sports, nothing wrong with making money, nothing wrong with buying J's. I don't like Nikes, but you can buy them if you want. But there's nothing wrong with buying those things. But you got to check yourself. Are you replacing God with those things, with that stuff, with that car, whatever it is that you have? And here's what this verse does, and it reminds us that we can do this. When God says, listen, why don't you go, you've been serving those other gods, go ask them to save you, because I'm not saving you anymore. What that does for you and I is it gives us some practical counsel right now. You know what I can do when I'm praying, and some of you are going to ask me, hey, Pastor Chris, can I use you as a reference for my job? I always ask you, whenever somebody asks me, can I put you down as a reference? I ask them this. I say, hey, you going to stop being a Christian? No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to tell them I can't work Sundays. Okay, we'll see. You know, yeah, go ahead and put me down. But if I don't see you at church anymore, I'm going to come to your house. Fool. Here's what you can do. When you're considering, like, should I get a job? Should I do these other things? Ask yourself this. If I am going to get a job, or I'm going to go for sports, or I'm doing whatever, education, whatever it is that you're doing, ask yourself this. If I'm doing that instead of following the Lord, instead of being at church or being in fellowship or being at a Bible study, and I go, you know what? I'm going to substitute that. I'm going to push that off for a while. I'm going to do this. Ask yourself this question. You go and get a job, or you get a car, or you get your new shoes, or you make the team, whatever it is that you do, whatever you're pursuing. Let me ask you this. If you get home next week and mom says, hey, come sit down at the table, and mom says, I got something to tell everybody, I've got cancer, I'm dying in 3 weeks. You ask yourself this. If I've got the shoes, I've got the car, I've got the fame from sports, I've got whatever it is that I've been chasing, are those things going to save me in that moment? Is that what I need? Is that what's going to comfort my heart? Oh, Lord, my mom's dying. Thank God I've got these new shoes. It sounds so stupid, doesn't it? And yet, Christians do it. They've been doing it every year since I've been in youth ministry. More than 20 years I've been in youth ministry. And every year, students make that same decision. They go chasing things that when everything comes falling apart, none of those things can save them. And I've seen it so many times. It's sickening. Somebody who gave themselves completely to sports, their head, man, it's all about doing it. I'm doing it, I'm doing it. Oh, but I'm going to glorify the Lord. They're doing it. Boom, what happens? Soccer players, the knees, right? Gone. ACL, torn. You can get it operated on, but it's never going to be the same, not in time for high school, not in time for high school sports. And you're going to have a setback that's probably going to set you back for the rest of your, that career that you were chasing after. Am I saying that you shouldn't chase after that career? No, I'm not saying that. We need Christian soccer players. What I'm saying is, you don't want to trade your relationship for God in for that thing, because if it all comes crashing down, what do you got? What are you left with? God, he's telling them, hey, listen, you've been worshiping those other gods. You've been pursuing them. Go ask them to save you in verse 14. Go and cry out to the gods which you have chosen. Let them deliver you in your time of distress. And in verse 15 it says, and the children of Israel said to the Lord, we have sinned. Do to us whatever seems best to you. Only deliver us this day, we pray. So they put away the foreign gods from among them and served the Lord. But look at this in verse 16. It was too late. His soul could no longer endure the misery of Israel. He was done with those people. And here's the sad, look at this in verses 17 and 18. You tell me what's missing. Then the people of Ammon gathered together and encamped in Gilead. So now they're so bold, the enemies camping in Gilead. And the children of Israel assembled together and encamped at Mizpah. And the people, the leaders of Gilead, said to one another, who is the man, in other words, where's the judge, who will begin the fight against the people of Ammon? He shall be head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. Where's our Savior? Send him, and he's going to be our king. Did you notice what happened in verse 18? And the people, the leaders of Gilead, said to one another. You go, what's so sad about that? Here's what's so sad about that. They tried talking to God, and God says, man, it's been too many times. You're on your own. So what do? Now they're trying to figure it out on their own. Let's just talk to one another and see if we can figure it out. I don't want plan B. I don't want Chris's plan. I've already done that. I took 20 years of my life working Chris's plan. It doesn't work. I don't want that plan anymore. Let me show you the consequences of their choices. Look at this. In verse 7, we're told that they were experiencing the anger and rejection from the Lord. In verse 8, They were experiencing harassment and oppression from the enemy. They got nowhere to turn. In verse 9, they were experiencing severe distress. In verses 13 and 14, no more deliverance from the Lord. God says, no, you figure it out on your own. And in verse 18, they were left to save themselves. Verses 17 and 18, what we just read. Now you look at that list. Is that what we want? In Nehemiah chapter 9, one of my favorite books in the Bible, one of my favorite chapters, it says, recounting the history of Israel, says they refused to obey. They were not mindful of your wonders that you did among them, but they hardened their necks, and in their rebellion, they appointed a leader to return to their slavery. But you are God, ready to pardon, gracious and merciful, slow to anger, abundant in kindness, and did not forsake them. Now you tell me, you look at that list, and then you think about what I just read. Which one's better? It's a no-brainer. He's ready to pardon. If I'm a Christian today and I find myself living in a place of disobedience to the Lord, I'm trying to do my own thing, listen, now's the time, snap out of it. God's ready to pardon. What does that mean, ready to pardon? It means that what I need to do is say, Lord, please forgive me. I'm heading in the wrong direction. I need you to help me out, save me. I don't want to go down that way. I've heard the warning from Judges chapter 10. I don't want to go that way. And you make that recommitment to the Lord. You go, okay. Because God has a limit. I don't know what the limit is. And I'm not saying that you're going to sin so bad that He's just not going to save you anymore and you're not going to be saved and you're going to go to hell. I'm not saying that either. What I am saying is that you as a Christian can be fighting against God to the point that God says, okay, I'm going to let you figure it out on your own. You go ahead. You don't want to have anything to do with me? Then I'll tell you what, there you go. You got your freedom. And we may experience some tremendous difficulty, some hardship because of our disobedience. Now, not all hardships, not all hard times are because of our disobedience. But when we are experiencing those hard times, those difficulties, we need to ask ourselves, man, where am I going? Where have I been? Have I been serving the Lord or have I been serving other things? You want to check yourself, self-analyze, and say, man, where am I at? I need to recommit to the Lord. Do that today. Why leave here without doing that? Say, Lord, you know what? I'm sorry. I've been living stupid. I need to stop. Let me just start over here. God, please forgive me. I know that you're ready to pardon, so let me just stop. Let me just recommit myself to you. So, Father, we thank you so much for